Uh, Folks, as you're listening to the session, as we were introduced, there is the real show and the trailer. So I am the trailer for the first few minutes, first 15 minutes, and then of course Nupur is the one who's going to deliver the real goods for the rest of the session. So thank you for bringing it home, Nupur. As I was sitting here thinking about what you all were doing in Gurgaon, 9 o'clock on a winter morning in India, especially in the Delhi area. And all I can think of is hot, really piping hot aloo parathas with amachar and dahi for breakfast. And I wouldn't want anybody to come in my way on that. So I apologize for those of you who didn't get finish your breakfast. But anyway, what I'm going to do in the 15 minutes that I'm going to be speaking to you, I want to share three things that set the stage for what I want to talk about, and three things that I think you're already thinking about because you live in the same world that I do. So I hope what I present is not anything new, but what I hope I present is a different way of thinking about problems that you already are wrestling with. So let me set the stage for why I am here on this call today with you, what gives me some legitimacy to talk about this issue. The first point, the first part, it is summer of 1977. I'm a freshman, first year student at IIT Bombay. I'm not sure of the time, but I think it was August when we started. In the first few weeks, we used to have what is called as the seniors ragging the freshies. In the US, we call it hazing. I'm not sure whether it still happens, but this is where older nerds are trying to make fun of younger nerds. And my first, ragging session was this really smart, third year student who kind of asked me in Bombay Hindi. I was in IIT Bombay, and he said, "Kya hero? IIT kyun aaya re?" And I said, no, I had no idea. He said, and then he of course offered me the options, and he said multiple choice. He said, "Chapa ke liye aaya ki seekhne ke liye aaya?" And for those of you who don't get my Bombay Hindi, I hope someone around you can help you with it. Chapa is getting the stamp of approval. Seekhna is to kind of really learn. And I was absolutely caught off guard because it was the first time someone asked me the question of what was my purpose in life. And that was something that I had really bothered to ask, to be honest. I was smart enough to pass the JEE and get into IIT, and that's all I cared. And that's what I was expected. So people said, "Fantastic, you got in." Life is made. I didn't think harder about what was it that I was going to do in IIT that would make my life. And my senior, when he asked the question, pretty much nailed the issue that you and I are facing, because that's the transition that the MBA programs and any leadership development program, whether it's a degree or a certificate, is facing today. No longer are these degrees and certificates tickets to a career in business. Students now are looking at them as enablers, and that's a fundamental shift. No longer is it that once I have that, I can get myself a job and everything else works out. Now it is, I'm going to get a job and I need you to tell me how you're going to help me do better at it. And that's the fundamental shift. And whatever I'm going to speak about comes under that umbrella. Are we capable of making the shift that learners have already asked us to make and are demanding of us? The second thing that I want to use data point that I want to use to kind of clarify this point is what I'm presenting to you today is not my academic training. I have a PhD in management science with a major in marketing. So I've done stochastic models and quantitative models of brand choices and things like that. Leadership development was not what I kind of focused on when it came to in my PhD program. The reason I'm able to talk to you about this is, like Messina introduced, the jobs that I've held over the last decade. I have served as the chair of HBS Executive Education. I have served as chair of HBS Alumni Relations. And for over the last 11 years, I've been the chairman of the Harvard Business Publishing Company. In fact, I have an appropriate title which captures how I feel about these jobs. As I was introduced, my title is Senior Associate Dean, and the acronym there is SAD, which gives you a flavor for how I feel about these jobs in today's world. It so happens that I am the only faculty member at the school in the history of the school that has held these three administrative roles. And in the last decade, through these roles, I have met client firms, I have met senior executives, decision makers who decide on talent development programs, and individual learner themselves, from frontline first level managers right through to C-suite executives who have used HBS and HBP to serve their own and their organization's talent development needs. What I have learned, therefore, what I'm sharing with you is what I have learned by doing and being, not through knowing. And that's the theme that I'm going to be talking about. We are moving in a world away from learners where we have focused on them, teaching them the knowledge part, the logos, in the logos, ethos, and pathos that the Greeks talked about. The learners are coming back to us and saying, it's not just the knowledge that I need to know how to use it and how to get things done. The doing and the being, that is important. What I'm presenting to you is captured in a book on executive development that has been recently published by the Stanford University Press. It's co-authored with Mania Moldovno, who's the heading up executive education and at the University of Toronto. We also have a 2019 HBR article that captures a few highlights from the books. In my role as chair of alumni relations, I've had the chance to meet with HBS alums through the ages. The oldest alum I met is from the class of 1952, I think. And I have met right through to the class of 2022. As I listened to the older alums, it was very, very humbling when I asked them the question, to hear their answer to the question when I asked, what are the subjects that you remember most? More important, what are the subjects you learned in your program that were the most relevant to you in your career? What was humbling about their answers was that they talked about courses that we don't even teach today at the school. And think courses like effective communications. I mean, things that we don't do. And they said those are the most important things. I learned how to be a more effective leader because I could communicate better. And I learned that at HBS. They also talked about softer subjects like leadership, power and influence, building teams, and so on. But here again, they said, I got the start at HBS, but I learned it in the school of hard knocks. So time and again, what they were telling me was what we taught them was not what they really remembered, but it was how we taught them that mattered. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by how we taught them? Because they keep coming back to saying, what HBS really gave me, my HBS experience gave me, was critical thinking and decision-making under uncertainty and limited resources. So what they were saying was, it is more how I learned at HBS that I found most valuable than what I learned. When I think about myself as an academic, I think I teach my students two things: pattern recognition and storytelling. To make sense of the world, which is pattern recognition, at a time when others see noise and chaos, is what we all do for our students. And then to be able to take those patterns and communicate them to others in their teams, in their organizations, for the others to follow on the course that they have chosen as leaders, is what we do well, and what we do when we do right, do successfully, which is pattern recognition and storytelling. Now, coming to the younger alums, when I asked them about what is it that they found valuable, they didn't spend much time talking about what was valuable. They talked about what they didn't get. And very often they would say, you taught us how to be CEOs. I mean, you taught us cases on what Jack Welch did when he became CEO of GE in his 40s. But turns out that when I go to my job, they don't want me to be CEO. They want me to be a frontline manager. And the issues that I have to deal with are issues that you did not cover in the coursework that I did at HBS. So here again, what these young alums were saying is there was a disconnect between what we were teaching and what they needed. The older alums were saying they learned in the school of hard knocks. The younger alums were saying, I still am trying to figure out when and where I'm going to learn. And so what is it that I'm trying to establish here is there is a disconnect between what we do and what they get. And as we write in the book, what we are good at is what I call as the FAR transfer model. We teach our students in the classrooms. We teach them cases or lectures on, in situations that are very different from the world that they live in. And what we promise them is whatever they learn in the classroom, in the way we teach it, will automatically transfer in and work for them in the world that they're going to go to after they graduate and when they're back at work. That is a leap of faith. And that works when what you're teaching them is critical thinking, because that transfers across far spaces, in context, in time, in space, and so on. Students are coming back and saying today, what I need is not a far transfer model. What they want is a near transfer model, which is don't just teach me what I need to know, teach me how I'm going to use it, and what do I need to be, who I need to be able to make it happen. The doing and being part that Datar and Garvin, two of my colleagues, have talked about in their book, which is all about rethinking the MBA. So that's the issue that we're dealing with today, a disconnect between what we do well and what the individual learners are asking, whether they're MBA students or executives at different points in the arc of the professional career. So let me give you a few pointers or few issues for you to wrestle with that I am wrestling with myself. The first begins with the agent. The agent is the faculty. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the right talent? Are our faculty people like me our strength, or are they our liability? And what do I mean by that? I mean, the debate today that we are having is classified under a broad umbrella of rigor versus relevance. When you hire from faculty who are academics, who are from the disciplines, what you're hiring is rigor. While if you hire from practitioners, people who have experience in the world, real world working, you're hiring relevance. Now, one or the other is not enough. Rigor in itself is not enough. Relevance in itself is not enough. And let me explain why that is the case. To understand that, actually, one needs to understand the world of business education a little bit. Now, when HBS was first set up, the rest of the university looked down upon the business school because they thought of business not as a science, not as an academic field, but as a trade. And that is true even today. Business is neither a profession nor a field. It is a trade. And we all know how trade perpetuates itself. Trade perpetuates itself when masters teach apprentices on the job. That's how you learn, whether your trade is a carpenter or whether you're a mason or whether you're an artist, you learn from the master on the job. But what did we do in the world of business education? We took that, what was a trade, and tried to codify it. We tried to codify it by hiring people like me, people with academic qualifications, to put theory to explain the world of practice. And that's really where there is a gap today. Because what's the problem? If you hire people from practice, executives to teach, they're great at storytelling. They're brilliant because they can talk about their experience. But what they lack is pattern recognition, because they're not trained to do that. So they can give you story after story, but what do you do with the stories? The listener doesn't know. On the flip side, when you hire an academic who comes from the world of theory, they talk about frameworks, but unfortunately frameworks that don't apply in the real world, that are too simplified to capture the complexities of the real world. And there is the disjoint that is real, and something that you all, I'm sure, are wrestling with the same way I am wrestling with other senior leaders at HBS, which is bridging the gap between rigor and relevance. Now more than ever before in the world of business education, we need faculty who can do three things: have rigor in their skill set, have relevance in the problems that they solve, and are great teachers in their ability to engage and help learners learn. So that transfers to the next point that I want to make, which is the gap in what gets taught and what needs to be taught today. Uh, what what I have found is in most business schools and traditional academic institutions, we are good at teaching what I would call as algorithmic or technical skills. We can teach ratios well. We can teach, the frameworks well. But what the learners want are not these kinds of only algorithmic skills. What they want are relational, communication, and affective skills, which are all around job readiness. Those skills are very, very hard to teach for those who don't understand how to do it themselves. And that's the problem we have, which I've explained again. So effectively developing these skills in today's virtual hybrid environment is even harder than just being in the real world. And that's a problem that I have faced myself and seen others who are dealing in the same situation, wrestling with. And I'm sure you're thinking about the same thing. I have been reviewing a number of curriculums from Indian institutions. I get to see in the last 18 months, there has been a significant shift away from discipline-centric to cognitive skills, specific cognitive skills, which are more integrated with work. But the question I think you all are asking for sure in this conclave, and I'm sure we'll continue to wrestle with, is how far have we moved the needle? And tie this with the first point that I made. Do we have the right agents to do it? It becomes very important. The third thing I want to kind of highlight for you to think about is most of us are good, and I'm a marketing academic. I mean, I'm a B2B marketer. And what I think we are really good at are mass marketers. And mass marketers, when you think of mass marketers, the person that comes to mind is Henry Ford. And when Henry Ford comes to mind, I hope you all remember the phrase that he is famous for. You can get any model you want as long as it's Model T. You can get any color you want as long as it is black. What Henry Ford said was, what I do is good, but I know how to do only one thing. And as long as you are willing to take that from me, you'll get it at a great price. And then, you're off to the races. That is a model that we have to migrate from. And we have to move to what I call as the one-to-one marketing model. We have to move away from standardized delivery of like Henry Ford to providing bespoke, one-of-a-kind, unique solutions for each individual learner. In our book, Mania and I captured this concept as the personal learning cloud. Each individual learner has their own personal learning cloud. And this personal learning cloud is a program that is curated by the individual learner themselves, but with the help of the people where they're going to be working, the firm, the institution that they're going to work for, and the educator who's going to help them learn. So 3 parties curating a personalized learning cloud for each individual learner in a cloud which will be highly modularized, which will have to be done over time at the pace that fits the learner's career objective. So we have to move away from a transactional, episodic approach to educating people to a more relational, long-term, over the professional arc of individuals, and done at their pace, at their place of work, and at their pace. So we need to be designing and executing hybrid models which leverage the power of digitalization, but build on the real world to create personalized, at the same time, very socialized learning platforms. This will mean that we have to learn how to unbundle what we offer. We have to decouple the elements in the bundles that we have created. We have to disaggregate these elements and then reconfigure them from a learner-centric perspective. And as I said, I'm a marketer myself, and I keep talking about customer centricity. But I have to tell you, the world of business education is a very production-centric world. And that world will not suffice in the future. Everything has to be done from the perspective of the individual learner and has to be done on their terms in their mode. Which then leaves me to the last point that I want to make for you to be thinking about is if we are moving to a relational model of continuous learning over the arc of the professional career of the individual learner, what we are basically getting into is lifelong learning. And if we are going to get into lifelong learning, the current artificial segmentation that we have of saying that there are MBAs and there is executive education, that artificial segmentation is going to collapse. It's going to break down, and we're going to have only one world, which is one of executive development. Now, I've given you many thoughts to think about. I am lucky to have a partner in Nupur who's going to weave all these things together and magically make a coherent story out of this. I hope I've given you a few thoughts to think about. I've asked you to think about the agents who are going to do the change. I've asked you to think about the individual learner and how we can create bespoke solutions for each individual learner. I've asked you to think about how do you do it in a hybrid model where you combine synchronous with asynchronous, you combine real world with digital, and you combine episodic with lifelong learning. And then the last thing I'm leaving you with is a world of saying there are people who learn when they're young, typically the MBAs, and then there are people who learn in their old at different stages of the career, which is executives. That model is going to break down too. We do all these things, we will truly move towards being client-centric, customer-centric, or in the language that we're using today, learner-centric. I hope I've given you a few things to think about. These are questions that I have been wrestling with over the last decade. I'm sure in the next 45 minutes, you'll come up with the right answers. And I'm waiting to hear those answers from Nupur and team because I am desperately looking for answers myself. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I wish you all the very best. From everything that I've heard about this conclave, the very best and most experienced minds in the world of business education are in the room. And I'm looking forward to hearing back the learnings and the recommendations that you have for all of us to do what we need to do, which is definitely make the world a better place. So stay safe, take care, and thank you very much.